Okay, so welcome this evening. We're going to start with our special programming, and I'm happy to welcome Sammy Morris, who is a part of the Purdue Libraries and Archives, and I know she has a lot of really interesting stuff to share with us tonight. So Sammy, if you want to introduce yourself and kick off with whatever you have to say.
Thanks so much. I just want to thank Hannah and all of you for taking time to listen to me today. I'm excited to introduce you to the archives and have this opportunity to chat with you a bit. My presentation is going to be fairly informal. I do have a PowerPoint, but that's sort of just to remind myself not to forget anything. And there will be time for questions and answers at the end, so please feel free to ask those whenever you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and now find my presentation and share that with you. Okay, so if you all could just confirm for me that you're seeing that PowerPoint now.
Yep, we can see it.
Everything looking okay there?
Yep, looks good.
Terrific. Awesome. Okay. Well, I wanted to, I really could probably talk about the archives for a long time, and but knowing that your time is precious and that we're all a bit zoomed out these days, I'm mostly going to focus on what the archives are today and ways that we interact with students. And I'm also going to leave time to answer your questions and take suggestions you might have for ways that we could be more visible to students, because I think that's one of our biggest challenges, and we'll get into that whenever I talk with you about our location, which is a key part of that. So going ahead and getting started, I'll tell you a little bit about me. This is my glamour shot from the archives. I have a background in English literature. That's my undergraduate background, and my master's is in library and information science. So I went to University of Texas at Austin, where you're able to major in archives, and that has been really critical to my later career development, having that specialization in archives. You might be wondering, what kinds of background and training other archivists have, and it's fairly typical for archivists to have either a master's in archives through library science programs, or a master's in history with perhaps a specialization in public history or archives. That's in general where most of the backgrounds are. But we are increasingly seeing archivists with PhDs, especially in academic positions where they might be required to specialize in a particular subject. So to give you an idea of what a typical day is for us, first of all, I want to say these days there's definitely no typical day, but even before the pandemic, we always have had a lot of variety to our work in the archives, and that's one of the things I love about working in the archives the most. But if you're kind of wondering in general what a head of archives and special collections does, in a given day, I would work with donors of collections. A big part of my work is identifying where there's gaps in our collections in the archives, and then creating relationships with the people who have those collections, and persuading them to donate those to us so that they can not only be preserved, but so that they can be accessible to a bigger audience. And a lot of those donors are staff or faculty at the university who create collections either about their department history or about their own research and teaching. And these are collections that we might seek out, to fill out our collections better. We really focus on not just Purdue history, but the histories of the people affiliated with Purdue and certain topics that Purdue is known for as a land-grant institution. And I'll get into that a little bit more later when I talk about what we collect. But on a typical day, we get a lot of questions from people about different aspects of Purdue history. So just as an example, today, we received a question from the marketing and media staff about the history of the bell tower. And that's because the bell tower will be having a birthday coming up soon. And there's interest in the university in celebrating that. So we gathered images of the construction of the bell tower. We looked for oral history interviews where people talked about the bell tower, things of that nature that we would provide to the university to help answer their questions. I also have just a management role as head of the archives and special collections. So I do things like supervise staff, write reports, and gather statistics needed to show how we're growing over time and where we have areas that we want to continue to grow into. I am a member of the faculty. I'm a full professor at Purdue, so I have expectations for research and teaching as well as faculty governance and things of that nature. Like many faculty, I spend a lot of my time in meetings, but also that comes with being a supervisor. So we have a staff of 9. We have in the past years had a larger staff, but this year's been a little difficult with the hiring freeze. But in general, I make myself available to the staff to answer their hard questions. So they're the ones who, when we get a collection in, they start to go through it and create documentation on what's in this collection, what are the subject areas, what are the date ranges, and sometimes complex issues arise. So I often am meeting with them to discuss, unusual things they found in their work. And just in general, the archives is here for everyone. And I really want to emphasize that because there are places where archives are limited in their audience to people with PhDs or people who are, PhD students. And that's completely the opposite of how we operate in the Purdue archives. We believe the archives are for everyone, and we really encourage student and public use of them. So one of our challenges, though, is finding us. So you're seeing a picture here of our entrance to the archives, which is located inside the Humanities Library and Stewart Center. So hopefully some of you have visited us before, maybe as part of a class visit or doing your own research. But if not, the way to get to us is to go into the Humanities Library and go up to the 4th floor. And what we have there in those collections is very rich. It started as collections that really were focused, pretty specifically on Purdue history, which meant that we were collecting the records of the academic departments and colleges and schools. So when you think about what records are generated at Purdue every day, there are emails, there are memos, there are press releases, there are, lecture notes and all sorts of things. And we become the keeper of those things whenever they reach a certain life that we know that we want to preserve them in perpetuity. So the departments might keep their own records, for a given amount of time. And then when they're not using those older materials as regularly, they might transfer those to us. But increasingly, we're also reaching out to students and other aspects of the Purdue family writ large. So instead of just thinking about the administrative history of Purdue that's really gathered in, those documents created by the university itself, we're also trying to think about putting a human perspective on things. So we do oral history interviews with people who are alumni or retired faculty and staff. We are really trying to diversify our holdings. So, if you're familiar with how archives get started, they often are seen as a place of power because many archives start as sort of memorials to important people. So you might think of, a president of the US who has papers that, clearly everyone thinks should be preserved, or a senator, or, even a university president. But then when you start drilling down into, what are in these collections, you realize that one of the biggest voices that make up a university is the student body. And there was not in the past a lot of focus with the archives on student perspective. So we've really tried to be more proactive in reaching out to students. And one of the things that I've been really pleased with is that students are reaching out to us. So the cultural centers on campus, for example, are very interested in, documenting how they were founded and making sure that they're keeping up with their history as they go forward towards anniversaries and such. So we have been very successful in interviewing some of the student leaders who were founders of the cultural centers on campus. And we also have really encouraged students to think about how there's a lot of research that goes into what was student life like in the 40s, or what was student life like in the 70s. But one of the things that's really fascinating to me is that, every day we're kind of making history. So each of you as a Purdue student has, sort of activities that happen on and off campus that define, student life. And each person is different, but when you start to pull together those documents, which today are mostly online, so thinking about your social media accounts, or if you have a personal website, or your email and text, those are things that tell people what your day-to-day life is like. So you're actually making future history in a way. And we really love to talk with students about that, because the ways that we've documented student life in the past have been through university publications like the Student Yearbook, and that publication does not exist anymore. So it's very important to us to make sure that as student activities and documentation of that go digital, that we're being proactive about that as well. So we do web archiving in the archives, and we also selectively have been capturing some social media accounts as well. There are a lot of privacy issues and ethical concerns to this work, and so we do it very selectively and cautiously. But I just to let you all know that the work you're doing today is going to be important to people who are scholars of Purdue history in 20, 50, 100 years. And so giving some thought, to what are the records that you're creating that someone might find of interest in the future. So I mentioned already that we collect about Purdue history, but we also have a few other areas of specialization. So Purdue, as you all know, is very well known in the history of flight and space. We've produced a lot of engineers who've been involved with the space program, a significant number of astronauts, and just a lot of people who have been involved from the ground up in building the space program. And even prior to that, flight history through Amelia Earhart being a member of our staff in the 30s. So we decided to very purposefully collect things on flight and space history and make that an area of focus for the archives. And when I think about sort of our bookend collections for that, we've got the early history with having Purdue being the first university airport in the nation. So we've got that as sort of the beginnings of flight. And then we go all the way up to the present day as more alumni are inducted into astronaut training and things like that. So it's a point of pride for Purdue, this history with flight and space. So we've tried to reflect that in our collections. But we're also very cognizant of sort of the non-famous people that need to be documented and preserved as well. There's a lot of research interest in just the day-to-day lives of people. And so we don't want to always focus on, the well-known figures. And that's one reason that we started the Women's Archives. I guess this was back about 13 years ago. We saw that most of our collections were very male-centric, and there was a real problem with trying to identify women in Purdue history at that time. So luckily, we had an alumna who was very passionate about this, and she funded the Susan Bulkley Butler Archives, and that allowed us to really focus collecting actively the papers of women affiliated with Purdue, as well as the state of Indiana. And that's really important because there are some very major figures, women in our history, who have done things on a national level where they've made contributions. And I know Hannah mentioned that she's reading the Dean's Bible right now. You may or may not be aware that some of the early deans of women at Purdue did really significant things. So our first full-time Dean of Women, Dorothy Stratton, was the founder of the Women's Reserve of the Coast Guard, and she coined the name SPARS for that group. We have Helen Schliemann, who Schliemann Hall is named after, who abolished the curfews for women students when she was a leader on campus. So there's a lot of important women's history that wasn't really being captured, and that's why we created that focus area. And then one of our most surprising focus areas is psychoactive substances research. And that's exactly what it sounds like. We are collecting the papers of scientists, professionals, doctors, psychiatrists who have done research studies using psychedelics. So you might think, how does this fit into Purdue? Why is this here? And one of the things that I'm most proud of is this was another recent collecting effort just in the last 10 or 15 years, where we've been able to see over time a huge amount of research interest in it. So to give you a little background, David Nichols was a faculty member at Purdue, and his area of specialty was pharmaceutical chemistry. And for a long time, psychedelics like LSD were banned from any sort of government sponsored research. But in the last decade and a half or so, David Nichols was working at Purdue in his lab producing LSD for really important government and research studies. And so he was very concerned that the early history of these psychedelic substances, which had really taken on a stigma in the 70s as part of the counterculture movement, he realized that a lot of that research was circling back, that the government had shut down research that was potentially helpful to people overcoming post-traumatic stress disorder or other kinds of addictions. So he began talking with us about potentially collecting things, and we realized no one else was collecting this history. So that's been really rewarding because we have a fairly good number of international students and scholars who come to Purdue to use these collections and learn about that history. There's been a resurgence in the last several years in psychedelics, and they're really actively being considered now, some of them for legal use. So it's been really exciting to sort of see that collection reflect that recent growth. And then another area we collect are rare books, and those kind of cover all subject areas. Our strengths really are in history of engineering and science. So we have fantastic collections on the history of railroads, canals, flight. But the rare books are not just STEM related. So we also have wonderful collections of beautifully bound limited edition books. And we have early manuscripts that predate the printing press. So it's not a large collection, but we have some medieval manuscripts and leaves from early medieval manuscripts. So really, if you're thinking about any aspect of history, the archives is a great place to start, because we have these collecting focus areas around Purdue, flight, women's, and psychoactive, but the rare book collections are much broader in scope, and those date all the way to the beginning of the printing press. And as I mentioned earlier, we have manuscripts that were actually produced by hand before the printing press in the collection. These are used by students who are studying the history of art, or they're looking at paleography, learning how to read and decipher early handwriting from different eras. There's a wide range of use of the rare books collections, and there's some of the things that people aren't really aware that we have. I wanted to touch on our mission because it's recreated here at the bottom of the screen, and it's kind of long, but in general, the reason the archives exists is we're here to preserve and share access to the history of Purdue, and the history being the things that have been documented. So that could be in text, it could be photograph, it could be maps, audiovisual, any format, it could be digital. But if it is one of a kind, it's not published, and it relates in some way to understanding Purdue or its people, it probably falls into our mission to collect, preserve, and provide access to it. So just to give you kind of an overview of our staff, our size, and what we do, I'm one of 9 staff in the archives and special collections. We have 1 clerical support person and 8 professional staff. And the main responsibilities the archivists have are, again, to collect materials, which requires working with donors. Answering reference and research questions that come from all over. So we have a lot of questions from the Purdue community that we serve, but we also have questions that come to us from students and faculty at other universities, as well as around the globe. For example, if someone's writing a biography of Amelia Earhart or Neil Armstrong, they pretty much have to use our collections because we have really stellar collections on those people. Some of the other things that we do are write guides to the collections. We call these finding aids, and it's sort of like cataloging for a large collection of documents or multimedia formats. So, catalogers in libraries catalog books so that you can find them in the online catalog. We catalog unpublished materials like letters, diaries, photos, and things like that that are one of a kind. And then some of the other ways we make those accessible are we're increasingly scanning our collections and making those available online. We do create exhibits, although right now with the pandemic, we don't have exhibits up for viewing. And I think I mentioned earlier that we've also created some collections ourselves by going out and interviewing people about aspects of Purdue history. A final thing is increasingly our work involves providing content for a variety of uses. So if there's a press release coming out about something at Purdue and they want to know a little bit about the history, they might ask us for some background. Or if someone's creating a video about Purdue and they want some old photos of campus, they might ask us for that. So our work really serves the informational needs of people who are doing research, especially around Purdue. And I wanted to talk about some of the ways that we interact with students because we really are interested in making the archives as accessible to students as possible. And we feel that students really help us shape the archives in thinking about, what are things that students are interested in learning about Purdue history, or what are things that students were involved with where they played a major role in Purdue history. So, there are protests and student movements going on now that are very important to sort of reflecting our overall national culture, right? We have systemic racism, we have, all sorts of injustices that it's important to show how the Purdue community responds to those. And so, for example, if students were involved in a protest and they had a list of their concerns, or if they had signs from that protest, those would be things that we would be interested in collecting because they sort of give you a feel for what's happening at Purdue right now. We also provide teaching and instruction to students. So we have a fair number of classes that come to the archives, and we teach students how to use archival materials in their research, which is pretty tricky because it's not like using a book or journal. It's using things that are unpublished, so you have to know how to cite those properly. And you also have to think about the moral and ethical issues of using collections of people's personal papers. So, just like the collections you might have on your life and your family, there are things in there that you might not want to make available for public use. And so we teach students about how to ethically use collections and make sure that, they're not exploiting things that they're seeing in the collections in some way. The other ways we interact with students, we do preserve the records of student organizations, and we're increasingly getting more of those collections in, which is fantastic. I mentioned oral history interviews with student leaders. And then one of the most important things I think we do in the archives for students is we employ a fair number of students. I think last year we had about 15 to 20 student workers in the archives, and that's a blend of undergraduate and graduate students. But I would say on a given year, we usually have between 5 and 10 undergraduates. And what that means is not only do the students help us in our work, but many of them have backgrounds or interest in history or rhetoric or different professional interests that kind of align with archives. So for example, if you're an undergraduate student at Purdue and you're thinking about maybe working in museums one day or libraries or an archival repository, getting that hands-on work experience in the archives is very valuable, whether you're looking to apply to graduate school or go on to work in a place of cultural heritage. And I'm showing here a picture of Max Campbell, who was a student in the archives a few years ago. He originally was a history student, and that's his degree, but he was very fascinated with archives work. And during the course of the years that he worked with us, he decided he wanted to become an archivist. So after his time working as an undergraduate, he went on to an internship at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. Then he went on to graduate school, and now he is a professional archivist working on his own. And that's just one example of, the students that we've worked with in the archives where we've sort of seen that passion for archives grow and really tried to encourage that. We also work as mentors for student researchers. So the Office of Undergraduate Research has a program called OUR Scholars, where they match up students with a faculty mentor. And we've worked with students through this program on doing things like research using our Amelia Earhart papers. So what you see in the left photo here is two of our OUR scholars, Jessica and Rachel, and they're actually showing on the laptop their research to Amy Klepner, who is the niece of Amelia Earhart. So this was a really special experience for all of us. Amelia Earhart's niece is writing a children's book about Earhart and how she contributed to feminism. And she reached out to Purdue and asked, do you have students who could maybe help with gathering some of this research that's in the archives, because she didn't think that she would be able to spend the time on site to do all that. And so Rachel and Jessica applied for these positions, and they were both very interested in Amelia Earhart and the 1920s and 30s and women's roles. And they were really able to dig into that collection and provide content that's going to be used in Amy Klepner's book. Jessica has graduated now, but is interested in pursuing a career in archives or museum studies. And Rachel is actually a continuing undergraduate with us who's going to keep doing some Amelia Earhart research with the goal of publishing her paper. So one of the things that I think we all find the most rewarding in the archives is we talk to a lot of classes. They're mostly in the College of Liberal Arts, but not always. And often students have never been exposed to archives before. And when they come to the archives and see these collections and materials that are so old and so different, it really kind of sparks their curiosity and interest, and many of them will keep doing the research they started in their class in the archives just because they don't want to stop. And I think they realize that when you do archival research, it's unique, it's original research, and so you're making a contribution to scholarship. You're not just copying materials from books and other secondary sources. You're finding things that haven't been written about. And so we've had several students who have gone on to publish their research in JPUR, the Journal of Purdue Undergraduate Research, and other students who've done more digital scholarship. So we've had students who've created online exhibits, special websites, blogs, and things like that to publish their research to make it easier for other people who are looking for information on the topic. I wanted to kind of quickly go over with you how you can see what we have in the archives collections, especially if you're interested in any kind of research surrounding Purdue history, or if you just want to learn more about what we have out of curiosity. Our archives website address is there, and that's a good starting point because we have three main avenues to go through to see what we have. The first is digitized collections, and those are in our eArchives repository, so the link is there. This is a great resource for remote scholarship. It's hard for students to get into the archives these days. We're doing social distancing and we're wearing masks and we have reduced hours. But if you go to eArchives, you can see a plethora of material in the archives that have already been scanned. And those include historical photographs of campus, people in Purdue history, their photographs, as well as things like the Debris Student Yearbook, Board of Trustees minutes, annual reports, all sorts of things about Purdue history have been scanned. But that's really just a tiny percentage of everything we have. So if you look in the archives and you don't see what you're looking for, it's good to go to Archive Space and see what collections do we have that haven't been scanned yet. Because even though we have a ton of digital collections, they really don't make up more than maybe 2% of our overall collections. And so we're always bringing in new materials that haven't been scanned yet. And it's a good idea to search the Archive Space records there. And then finally, if you want to see what early manuscripts or rare books we have, those can be searched in the regular library's catalog. So I wanted to share with you some fun, interesting little tidbits on Purdue student government history, just to give you an example of some of the things you could find in the archives. So all of the examples I'll show with you today are available in eArchives, so you can find them yourselves easily just by going to that website. But I learned some interesting and fun things that I thought I would share. So I'm showing you a page from the annual report of Purdue 1939, and it's talking about how the Purdue Student Senate, which was established around 1939, replaced the Purdue Student Federation. So that's interesting because, these were early forms of student government, and there may have even been something before this Purdue Student Federation, but this document gives us a starting point, like we can do searches now under Purdue Student Federation and see what we find. And if you look at this and kind of get a sense of what the concerns and issues were for students at the time, it's interesting. So, for example, right now we have no smoking on campus, but for a long time there was smoking, but in the very beginning there wasn't. So you sort of see these cycles of historical events happening where in the very early days of Purdue, they didn't allow any smoking on campus. And then here, documented in this report, the students were able to get rid of that rule or work towards getting rid of that rule in 1939. And then, of course, it was only in the last decade that that rule was reinstated, where smoking is banned or prohibited to certain areas. I also thought it was fun to see that students advocated and were successful in obtaining a half holiday to go to the IU football game, IU Purdue football game. So that was some good work on their part. And they legalized Cord Day for seniors. And I would be very interested in the Q&A part to hear if any of you have ideas on what Cord Day was, because it's a part of student history that's not really celebrated anymore, but it used to be a big deal. So I'll go ahead and show you another example. This is a page from the student yearbook, which is called The Debris. And it's really unfortunate we don't have a student yearbook anymore because it's a great source for getting a sense of what was happening in a given year on campus with students. And if you look at this one, which is from 1931, it shows you the student council in a group photo at the bottom with the president of student council at the top. And then it talks about how the student council was formed in 1907. So again, this is an early form of student government that would be a predecessor to Purdue student government. And it gives you a sense of some of the things they focused on, like they were concerned about driving cars on campus, and they wanted a university ring for students to wear. They also were concerned about publishing a student handbook. So this gives you kind of a synopsis of what they were interested in a way that we can't really create today without a yearbook, but we can through other kinds of records, like the records that Purdue student government produces can still be preserved. It's just that you don't really get that easy snapshot in a visual way, the way that we used to have with the yearbook. And then another example of early Purdue student leadership is this annual report from 1942, where they talk about how they restructured the student senate to allow sophomores and juniors to join. So what that automatically tells you is that probably the early student senate was really something that was privileged by seniors, and that there was this point of restructuring where they decided to allow sophomores and juniors to join. But you might notice, if you can read the fine print here, that it says they're extending that to elected members of the sophomores and juniors who have shown by the merits of their work a genuine desire to be members of the Senate. So they're still being somewhat selective there. But one of the things they're most proud of this year is establishing a central lost and found service, which I thought was interesting. It's also interesting that, you know, this is World War II era, 1942. There's no mention on this page of the war, but it does make you wonder how that was impacting student life at the time. So I want to end with recommending some additional sources for you if you're interested in Purdue history. Because of our recent 150th anniversary, we have 2 new books out about Purdue history that are really different than the books we've had in the past. So I'm kind of tooting our own horn with the Purdue at 150, because that was published by a variety of people who work in the archives, and it really focuses on a visual history. So there's a lot of images from the archives, and it's really trying to give that student voice, because our earlier publications about Purdue history were very administrative focused. But there's another wonderful new book called Ever True, and if you haven't had a chance to read that, it's an excellent book that's very focused on kind of storytelling about the people in Purdue history. So both of these books just came out last year, and I would highly recommend them for kind of a crash course in Purdue history. But also there's an increasing number of books about lesser known aspects. So Angie Klink has published several books about women in Purdue history. And I mentioned the Dean's Bible earlier, which is a great starting point if you're interested in the roles of early women leaders at Purdue. There's a fantastic film that was sponsored by the Black Alumni Association and the Black Cultural Center at Purdue called Black Purdue. I don't think that it's available online anywhere, but we can provide access to it through the archives. And it gives a tremendously important history of how the Black Cultural Center was founded and the student leadership that was required for that. And then we have a variety of other resources about Purdue history, like timelines, databases about our buildings, different online exhibits about different people and events in Purdue history. So I would just encourage you to check those out on our website, and also to email me or other archivists who could help you if you can't find what you're looking for there. So just a kind of final note is, if any of you are interested in becoming more involved in the archives, there's a variety of ways that you can help us and work with us. I mentioned earlier, we really want to capture and preserve the records of students and student organizations. So we do have some records of Purdue student government and different cultural centers where there's student leadership, but there are a lot of student organizations whose records we don't have. So if you're involved in other organizations, getting a sense of what photos and documents they have and considering whether those might be a good thing to transfer to the archives would be very helpful to us. You also can think about the things you as a student today are doing, just in your day-to-day life and studies that might be of interest to future students and scholars. So if you take photos of, events or your time on campus, or, you have a blog or website about your life, if you have anything really that you'd like to share with future students and scholars, we would be interested, because again, we don't just want to collect the stories of famous people. We really want the archives to be representative of our entire community. We have some social media accounts that we would love to have you follow us on. We've got Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook here. And then we also have a blog, which is written by the archive staff, called Memoirs and Memories. And I've listed the address here. We've done some really fun things recently on the blog, like talking about how we digitized the student newspaper, the Exponent, and how when you do that, there's a lot of text correction that needs to be done to make it searchable, to make it search accurately for things like people's names. And so we blogged recently about how many of the student employees of the libraries did transcription work on our digitized Exponent when COVID-19 hit, because that was when we were all sort of sent home and asked to work remotely, and we needed to keep our student employees working in the libraries. So many of the students who worked throughout the library's organization contributed to this Exponent transcription project. If you're someone who loves Purdue history and wants to just go to the Exponent and start correcting that text, let me know. I would be happy to hook you up with that. And then you can also schedule appointments to use the archives. Typically, when there's not a pandemic, you don't need an appointment, but because we do have reduced staff on site right now, we're asking people to make appointments before they visit. So that concludes my talks. Again, thank you so much for having me, and I would be happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So does anyone have any questions?
I had a question. Sorry, I can't raise my hand, but so how do you said you could schedule appointments to go check out these archives? Mm-hmm. How would you go about doing that?
So the first step is to email us, and our email is here, archives@purdue.edu. If you send us an email, we will connect you with an archivist who can identify the collections that would be of help to you, and then schedule a time for you to visit on site. We do sometimes are able to provide the collections digitally as well, but there's really personally, I don't think there's really any substitute for the physical experience, because there's just something magical about coming in contact with these documents and photos that are so old, and you learn a lot about the history of Purdue student life that way. In fact, I wanted to bring up again the Cords Day legislation that the student leadership did in the 40s, and ask you all if any of you have a guess as to what that is, because that was a past student tradition, the senior cords. And many students today aren't aware of that, but it was a really big deal at the time. And so it just goes to show you how these traditions and trends can change over time. But one of the things that I find most rewarding about having students come to the archives is, and I think this is especially true for undergraduates in their first or second year, they often have never seen archives and they may not be interested in history. But if we bring out a pair of senior cords, which are corduroy pants that the seniors were allowed to decorate with their organizations and academic interests, they're really beautiful. Each one is like a work of art. You know, it's a pair of corduroy pants that a student decorated with paint. And so it's kind of like very personalized. We bring those out to students today and they start to realize that they're connecting to this rich past of previous students that came before. And they're looking at something that a student just like them wore to football games. And they're thinking, what would someone learn about me, you know, from my life today as a student? So I love introducing students to the archives because most of them, even if they're not history majors, they can connect to Purdue history in a way that makes them feel like they belong here and they're part of that fabric that will continue, you know, beyond graduation. So I think that's a really fun part of my work. But great question.
Yes, President Gilmore.
First and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much. This has been the most interesting presentation that I've seen.
Yay!
Really, kudos to you all for making this work. I did have a question. For example, I'm sure you've heard of the Institute at Purdue, and if not, I'd be happy to share with you. But for initiatives like that, where students are sharing total data of the Purdue, do they have to be reported? Or is that something you kind of monitor and can take into account, or is that not a type of data that could be submitted to the archives?
I am so sorry, but when you were asking the question, my audio kept going in and out. Would you mind repeating it for me? I apologize.
Oh, no, absolutely. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So do you know of the Instagram page Black at Purdue?
Mm-hmm.
So for things like that, is that a form of data that can be submitted to the archives, and is that something that a student would need to officially submit, or do you monitor movements like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's an example of one of the things that we really want to be collecting, but we try to tread carefully because sometimes people have a expectation of being somewhat anonymous in those settings, and we really want to respect that and also not put people more in the spotlight maybe than they want to be with all of the police surveillance and so forth. But that is an example of really important data that's being generated right now that we are very interested in collecting. And we do have an archivist who looks around for social media, things like that, but we tend to put it in a dark archive for now because we don't want to put that up on the open web unless we have permission from the students who created it. So if you are involved with that or you know anyone who is involved with it, please do connect them to me because we would be very interested in having that become part of the archives. And we also, to the extent people are comfortable, would really love to do interviews with students or collect things that they are producing about their experiences. And you know, we have a good staff in the archives who are very concerned about privacy, confidentiality, and things like that. So if a student wants people in the future to be able to read about their experiences, but not today or not during their time as a student, we can work with them on taking those things now and restricting them for 10, 20, 50 years. So thank you for bringing that up because so much of the important student life right now is documented digitally, and it takes a lot more effort on our part to look for those things because they don't come to us naturally the way papers sometimes do. So yes, that would be a definite priority for us, and I would be very interested in talking with you more about that if we could maybe email later.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a
Any other
question.
questions?
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Shannon.
Hi, it was such a pleasure being able to listen to all of that. I learned so much. So Hannah did mention that she was reading the Dean's Bible, and I was wondering if I wanted to read that, and if I wanted to read like Ever True too, is there another copy available for me, or do I have to wait for Vice President Walter to finish?
You mean in the libraries? You know, I think that usually we have one copy of every Purdue history book in the archives, and then we usually have a copy in either the undergraduate library or the humanities library. So if you were looking for that and it was checked out, I might be able to get you another copy, especially if it's something like the Purdue at 150, where we had authors in the archive, so we can get, a few extra copies from the press. For the Dean's Bible, I don't know if that's available open access yet, but sometimes the press will publish a print book and then they'll make the digital version available for free online after a few years. I'd be happy to look into that for you. I don't know offhand how many copies of the Dean's Bible we have, but it is a great resource. I mean, you would really enjoy it. So if you want to, yeah, please do. Yeah, that'd be great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? I do have one question for you, Sammy.
Yeah, go ahead.
This might sound like a silly question, but do you all ever throw anything away? Or does it
we
always
actually
get
do.
kept forever?
So that is really a great question that actually a lot of people who use archives want to know the answer to. And the answer is complicated because once we acquire a collection, we do something before we even take it into the archives, which is called appraisal. And that basically means we review the contents of a collection and we talk to the people who created it and we try to get a sense of the research value of it. Because really for us, all of the value is how would someone use this again in the future? So what we think about is this unique? Because if it's something that another library might have, it's usually not as much of interest to us, but we really want those things that are one of a kind, that kind of tell the stories that aren't published yet. So we collect things in groups usually. So unlike a library where you might get one book or journal at a time, when people give collections of archives, they're usually in multiple boxes. They can be one item. There's nothing wrong with that. But like a person's personal papers will usually be about 10 boxes worth of stuff. And we would review that collection in summary and say, yes, we definitely want this collection. But let's say we're starting to go through it later to catalog it and we see that there's a bunch of duplicates in it. That would be an example of something that we would throw away because we don't want to keep more than 2 copies of like a publication, a brochure, a document. But in general, once things enter the archives, they're meant to stay permanently. And that's something that makes us very different from the rest of the library system, where there's really a focus on providing the most current information available to people, which is very important, especially in the STEM fields where you don't want to be learning about, outdated information about medicine or, agriculture. But with the archives, we go through that appraisal process and we really think carefully about, is this going to be worth permanent storage and all the time that our staff will give to cataloging it and preserving it? And if it meets that criteria, then we take it and we might do a little weeding of duplicates, but it's not ever gotten rid of, because that's sort of our promise to the person who gave it to us, that we will be the permanent caretakers of that collection.
Thank you. Are there any last questions? Okay, can we give Sammy another round of applause?
Thank you all so much. This was so much fun. And I really mean it. If you want to email me later, I see that I didn't put my personal email, but I will give that to you. It's Morris18. So it's my last name, Morris, Morris 18 at purdue.edu, or you can send an email to the archives account if you just want to set up an appointment. But I'm always happy to meet with students. I would encourage you in your research and talk with you if you're interested in future careers or anything. So don't hesitate to reach out. I love working with students. So
Thank you so much, Sammy. And I think if you just hit leave, you should be able to exit the meeting.
Excellent. Thank you so much, you all. Please don't be a stranger to the archives.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're good there. So that was a lot of fun. So at 7:49, I'll now call this meeting to order. And we're going to start with introduction of visitors. So if you're a visitor, if you could please state your name and reason for being here. Natalie, if you want to go.
Okay, hi y'all. I'm Camille. I am being appointed for the ED position in Governmental Relations.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move into proxy reports. So if you're a proxy, if you could please state your name and reason for being here. Yes, Maya.
Hi, my name is Maya Claire, and I'm a proxy for Kaylee Stow for the College of Science.
Thank you. Meryl, if you want to introduce yourself. Thank you. Any other proxies? A chat proxy? Okay, we have Ashita, and she's proxying for Amanda Shy. Okay, thank you,
Hi,
proxies. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, it unmuted me, but my name is Ishida, and I'm proxying for Amanda from the College of Liberal Arts.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We'll now move into roll call. So Secretary Gill, I'll pass
I think
over.
there was one more proxy.
There's one more proxy?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, we also have Lucy Clements, who's proxying for Olivia Wyrick. Okay, and with that, we'll now move into roll call.
Thank you. Senator Wyrick. Senator Wyrick.
I think that was Lucy, who's proxying.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm here.
yep.
Hi.
Hi. Senator Ferguson.
Here.
Senator Hopfer.
Here.
Senator Bonnet.
Here.
Senator Bogard.
Here.
Senator Hockenberry.
Here.
Senator McClary.
Present.
Senator Eingar. Eingar, thank you. Senator Guzman. He is on here. I don't know. I see him. Okay.
We see you, Saul.
We see you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You're okay. Senator Dodonna.
Here.
Senator Chris.
Here.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Senator Vitti. She's on.
Here.
Okay. Senator Jha.
Here.
Senator Griffin Little.
Here.
Senator Reed.
Here.
Senator Cabrera.
Here.
Senator Cadian. I always forget. Senator Cadian. I think he's on. Yeah. Thought I saw him earlier. Nope. Senator Stowe.
Proxy.
Senator de Guzman.
Here.
Is that correct? De Guzman? Okay. Senator Coffin.
Here.
Senator Reynolds. Senator Reynolds.
Here.
Oh, there you are. Senator Burkhart.
Proxy.
Senator Agnew.
Here.
Agnew. Okay. Senator Cope.
Here.
Is that correct?
Up.
Cop. Oh, darn it, every time. Okay. Senator Chavon.
Here it's Chavon.
Chavon. And Senator Shy.
Proxy.
Okay, roll call has been taken.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move into the Pledge of Allegiance. And senators, if you would remain standing for the Pledge of Purpose. I pledge allegiance. Our purpose. Okay, thank you. We'll now move into the approval of minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are approved as distributed. We'll now move into executive reports. President Gilmore, if you want to start.
Hello, everyone. Just a few things for you this evening. The survey put together by our senior assessment, along with some university professionals, closed last night, and we had 100 responses for the in-person survey, which is incredible. A little bit over 10% of the undergraduate student body, which is, again, amazing. In terms of the online survey, 635 students, which for the amount of online students is still pretty good, about 18%. Working to analyze those results right now, but we're using, just by Ken and I going through a little bit of the data, been able to use those statistics to start working on pass-fail legislation for the fall semester, and also working to get a reading day this semester, whether that be on election day or ideally sometime in October, if not both. But if you're interested in working on either of those pieces of legislation, there are 2 drafts currently. They're in the cabinet folder, subset president's folder, subset legislation folder. I understand it's a little complicated. I might move it out a little bit, but I would absolutely, anyone who wants to work on those, please feel free. Do shoot me an email so that I know you're working on the doc. But that would be wonderful. We have a student who's working on FSCL legislation. I know it went through committee review once, did not pass. He's made some edits, but is looking for a senator to sponsor. I think that's also another great opportunity for especially newer senators to get a feel to writing legislation. So if you're interested in doing that, please let me know, as well as I know David will hit on something later. Student survey elections. Yeah, no, I think that's all I've got for you. Thank you. I'm just kidding. See, I knew it. The note's right there. Greg, our treasurer handler, has not been here, and I just wanted you to know he works on Wednesdays, and that's why if you need to, please go to his office hours on Monday or shoot him an email. But just wanted you to know in terms of accountability, it's because he's working.
Okay, on my end, the student trustee search will have their first meeting next week, and you all will hear a lot more about that. But importantly, on Friday, a resolution that Asada and I and the current student trustee, Trustee Scott, worked on that updates the process and clarifies some of the language with the current search will come up at the Board of Trustees meeting on Friday. So Asada and I know will be speaking on behalf of that. And then I need you all to pull out your calendars and mark October 27th on your calendars. We're going to be having a Senate and Administration dinner at the Union that evening from 5 to 7. So dinner provided on PSG, and it'll be a time to connect with some different administrators. We're going to have Dean Cady from the Dean of Students, Dr. McCuskey, the Vice Provost for Student Life, Dr. Rickus, the Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning, as well as Dr. Savadi Sai, the Interim Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning. So I'm excited to have that opportunity, and I'll have more information to come to you all if you have any dietary restrictions and to give your preference if you need any special meals. So that will be coming soon. And other than that, Chief of Staff.
Hey everybody. Okay, so a few things from my end. So homecoming, if you haven't heard, has been pushed back to November 9th through the 14th. One of the reasons for this is that Big Ten football has started back up, and the first, or not, maybe not the first, but a home game aligns with the Saturday of that weekend. So to create a little bit more campus excitement, they moved it back to that time. During that time, they're not going to be hosting float parades like they had in the past, but to take the place of that, they're going to be passing out large Ps to student organizations that would like to decorate one. So we are going to be creating an informal committee within BOD and within the organization for anybody that would like to be a part of the team that decorates that. It will be a competition that's being held the same just as they would for homecoming floats. So, you know, if you win, you get the trophy for homecoming, and that's something we'd love to have. There will be, clearly there's somebody up for the executive director of GR, of which I'm sure we'll get the chance to speak about later on. There is something that communications has started called an MPF, and that is going to be deemed a marketing planning form. This is to allow posters, flyers, anything like that to be much more formalized and well kept track of, because a lot of times people are sending in, hey, can you make this flyer for us in the last few seconds or the last day before an event? And so it puts a lot of strain on the communications committee to be able to get that done, because they want to for our organization, but they also have their own lives as well. So they are creating a marketing planning form, of which the link to will be released either on or right before BOD of this upcoming next week. And that is what you will use, and you will submit through the form details about your event at least 5 days in advance, and they will be able to create a much better and more accurate graphic for you for the future. So that's something I was really excited about. Lastly, there is going to be a penny war being hosted by Mortarboard that is coming up during October. So the entire month of October, there is a penny war being put on between the large student organizations across campus for the ACE Campus Food Pantry. So what that looks like is there's going to be a link set up for donations, and we are trying to raise as many pennies as possible across campus, off campus, wherever you'd like to try and get them from, virtually for the student organizations that will eventually go towards ACE. So the winner of that will, of course, get bragging rights, but as well as a trophy and 50% of the money raised to be able to donate to the philanthropic org of their choice. So it's kind of a nice incentive if we as PhD were able to find a philanthropic org that we felt could really use the help, then that would be great for us to be able to win. But that would be it from me.
Okay, thank you. Any other executive reports?
Yeah, court is holding Know Your Rights Week from October 12th to the 16th from 11 to 2 a.m. So the justices and clerks will be tabling and handing out info on various topics relating to students' rights and resources on campus. So feel free to stop by, encourage others to come too.
Just one major update from me. People sitting behind me, I'm sure you've probably seen me on Reddit right now. I promise I'm not goofing off. I'm keeping track of the Ask Me Anything that went live today for Purdue Student Government as like a new way to engage with the student body, get some feedbacks, like try and answer some questions, and point people to resources if they need it. First of all, thank you to Asada. President Gilmore, I apologize. I've been hammering her with questions all day, just like from questions that are coming in from the student body. And thank you for answering those at the best of your ability. But yeah, we've actually seen like a solid amount of student engagement. We've had 10 to 12 questions, including a couple DMs for further information on what's going on. And we can like legitimately see this as a good way to engage with the student body. Obviously, this is like a trial run, so we're going to be working out a few kinks and like seeing what we can do better for the next time. But yeah, that's it for me.
Pro Temp Griffin.
Just one announcement is that we have a lot of new senators and Senate associate members. So if you see a new face around, that's why. So just go ahead, reach out, say hi, answer any questions. I tried to connect everyone to their individuals within their college, but if I missed out on anything, just let me know. But yeah, be sure to give them a smile under the mask and make sure they feel welcomed.
Any other executive reports? Okay, seeing none, we'll move into committee reports. Internal Affairs.
Hi, so yeah, Internal Affairs began the process of the Constitution, starting with Article 4, specifically talking to the executive branch as this is pertaining big problems with the current Constitution under what your role is. Feel free those concerns figured out, as well as any other senators. If any of you would like to get involved with that specific section, feel free to talk to me or anyone in IA.
Thank you. Financial Affairs?
Financial Affairs has nothing new to report right now.
Thank you. Campus and Student Resource Affairs? Yes.
All right, so CSRA, after being put in contact with a constituent, we have begun working to help understand the policy that has to do with meal plans and students and where they live and everything. Because the issue that this constituent was having was that even though they lived in a UR apartment, they were still required to get a meal plan, even though UR apartments have full kitchens. So we're trying to work with them on that, trying to figure out what to do and everything. And we are also looking into what we can do to help CAPS and other student resources around campus to ensure that not only do students have the proper help that they may need, that they also know that those resources are.
University Academic Affairs.
So UAA met last week, and then we are meeting tomorrow night. If anyone on my committee cannot make it, please let me know in the Slack. Keep checking the Slack. We are going to talk about an idea he has that would fall under UAA, so we're going to talk about that. And then also Alex reached out with some legislation from a senator last semester who needs more work on it, so we have 2 projects going on right now. If anyone ever wants to attend a meeting, we meet at Thursdays at 7:30. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we are into informal discussion. Do I hear any informal discussion? Yes, President Gilmore.
Okay, I'm looking through my notes. Another piece of legislation that I neglected to mention earlier is in terms of, we had an alumni reach out. Her name is Abby Lament. I don't know if anyone knows her, but it's doing a lot of research in terms of the internet filtering process, or so as we all know, there are some things that you can't access via PAL, and how Purdue went about getting those elements added and the contracts that were signed. I guess there's a lot to dig into there, and so she's doing that on her own. But if anyone is interested in this subject at all, she is looking for students to get involved, and it could be something to write legislation about. So please reach out to me if you're interested.
Okay, I found a room key on the floor. Will everyone check to see if you're missing your room key? It was kind of in that vicinity, but I don't want to forget. So I'm going to have this here. If it's anyone's, let me know. I'll run it up to you. Okay, and then I also wanted to ask, just by a show of hands, who has heard from their university senate chair at all? Like an email, anything? Okay, great. Has anyone gone to their university senate meeting yet? Okay, good. So if you have any conflict with the time that your university senate meets, please let me know and we can get that switched around. New senators, you probably haven't heard from university senate chair yet, but senators who have been assigned for a few weeks, if you haven't heard yet, if you could please let me know and I'll try to make sure that there's no disconnect there in communication. And then I also wanted to ask if anyone has thought about their constituent event yet and had any. I just thought this could be a good time maybe to share some ideas. If anyone had any ideas yet, just thinking about something, wanted to ask a question about how that might logistically work. Looking at the semester, we have about 6 weeks, 7 weeks before we'll be leaving, and those APFs take 2 to 3 weeks to process. So I wanted to just put that on everyone's radar, and I'm sure Alex and I are also happy to answer questions. Yes?
So College of Ag is actually working with PSUB, and we're going to do a movie night on Slater Hill. We're looking at October 23rd and 24th. We're still kind of in planning stages, working on what movie we're going to do, but if anyone is interested in something like that, we're kind of trying to start on that, so after we get through with all of it, it might be an option for another college if they were interested.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else? Yes, Senator Griffin-Little.
The Honors College is also planning on doing a movie night, but a virtual one. Plan on doing that right after Thanksgiving break, in between that and Dead Week. And we're also trying to figure out a way to send out like these little like movie watching gift bags. I don't know. The history department did it, and they sent out like popcorn and candy and stuff. So we're trying to figure out that, and if that doesn't work, then probably a little gift card or something.
Awesome. Anybody else? Yeah, Senator Bonnet.
The College of Ag Meet the Dean night in person, so we're thinking we'll do that virtually this semester because we have obviously batch registration and then some things are always changing in the College of Ed, so we'll probably do a Meet the Dean night.
Awesome. Okay, I'm also wanted to show you all, so if you go in the Senate folder, in the drive, and then this folder that says useful information. So in here is the updated Senate survival guide, so very helpful to read, kind of breaks down duties. There's also the proxy form, as I know we're getting into exam season. So if you need to have a proxy for a meeting, don't write it in this. Please copy it and make a new document and send that over to Pro Temp Griffin Little. And then I wanted to show you this document that you all need, constituent letter information. And this shows you how to send out your letters that you're going to write to your constituents. And this takes like, it says here, like 7 days for them to process that. So just keep that in mind. But if you have any questions about this, you can ask me, you can ask President Gilmore, you can ask Pro Temp Griffin Little, you can ask our advisor Martia. So please just let us know as you're working through this process if you have any questions. We're happy to help. Is there any other informal discussion?
This is super random, but in terms of events, I know a lot, we were talking earlier how we can't pass out food anymore, so it's hard to draw people in, but Chief Justice Zaniker let us know about a tip about pizza. Do you want to share it?
Yeah, so I called Domino's multiple times last week to get this figured out, but if you get in contact with the general manager, they can wrap individual slices of pizza in aluminum foil to make it protect Purdue compliant, because it's like a prepackaged individual serving. So that could be a good option for any events because everyone likes free pizza.
Awesome. Anything else? Did David have something, Asada? Later? Okay, perfect. All right. Oh, we already did committee reports. So with that, we'll move into old business. Do I hear any old business at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll move into new business. Do I hear any new business at this time? Yes, Senator Reed.
Second.
Is there properly motion to bring up Bill 2033, proposal of PSG Ad Hoc Committee for Mental Health Action. At this time, we'll open up the floor to the authors and then to the general floor.
We can tag team, Veronica. So, hi everyone. For those of you that were here last year, we participated in a first campus-wide inaugural Mental Health Awareness Week. We had a Mental Health Awareness Ad Hoc Committee, and so just wanted to note that the new word action is very intentional. It directly comes from our feedback that we got, and although Mental Health Awareness Week was extremely successful, we know that we had at least 23,000 interactions based off the amount of bandanas that we got rid of. We did note that students wanted more than awareness, and although we might have done that and had action items here, this time around. So Mental Health Action Week, we still get to keep the MHA acronym, which I know and love. But we're really excited to bring it back this year. I think the first time is always the hardest, but we know the processes picked out. We've got more campus partners that have reached out to us in advance. We're excited to continue this movement. Notably, Timmy Global Health is doing an MHA in a few weeks. We've got Purdue HR keeping and doing their own Purdue HR Mental Health Awareness Week. And so these are things that didn't happen before. And we know that now it's just even more prevalent in terms of taking care of yourself with everything that's going on. So really excited to do this with Veronica Reynolds and everyone else who I know will be a part of it. But Senator Reynolds, would you like to add anything?
I just want to say I know I didn't have this title last year, but I would be honored if you guys voted for this proposal because it's just something that's really important to me, and I had the honor of being really involved last year, so I would just love to be co-chair with Asada. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, I can answer them if you're wondering.
I'm so sorry, one last thing. And I know sometimes in terms of co-chairs, you talk about the efficiency, for me, it was really important to, you talk about the longevity, what is the legacy that I want to leave? And so we've made some really valuable connections, and I want to make sure to pass that down. Veronica thankfully has 2 more years, but then the idea is that she learns the skills that she needs and then can continue to pass it down. So really excited to work together. Also, I recognize that I have a bit more duties to fulfill year, so I didn't want to leave it hanging, and will still give my all, but I think that having the co-chairs in this case will be the most efficient way to proceed.
Is there any discussion from the floor at this time? Okay. Anyone online, if you have any discussion, you can feel free just to raise your hand or unmute yourself. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, we'll now move into a vote on Bill 2033. If all those in favor could please raise your name placards, and those online, if you could show your hand or raise the hand emoji. Okay, all those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Okay, with a vote of 25-0-0, Bill 2033 passes. Is there any other new business at this time? Yes, Senator Didona.
Motion to bring up Bill 2034.
It's been properly motioned and seconded to bring up Bill 2034, renewal of PSG Ad Hoc Committee on Support for Accessibility on Campus. We'll start with a few words from the authors and then move into discussion from the floor.
Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, Kaylee wasn't going to be able to join us today, so I'm going to talk on behalf of her for this bill. Last year and the year before that, we had that's the wrong bill. The Accessibility Ad Hoc Committee for Purdue Student Government, which was dedicated to increasing resources for people who required further accessibility on campus, as well as trying to fix certain problems that exist on campus in which Purdue lacked accessible buildings, be that for students, for faculty, etc. While we were able to get some work done, there were a lot of roadblocks on the way, and one of the main ones was that certain renovations for accessibility cost a lot of money, which is accurate, but it's not like a fair excuse in order to not do anything about it. And some talking points that Kaylee wanted me to mention included that Purdue, while being ranked 17 in public universities in the U.S., isn't even the top 45 of accessible universities. Even though disabled students have to pay the exact same amount of tuition as able students, but have less access to campus resources. With 21 out of 152 buildings being either partially or completely inaccessible at Purdue, and this is coming from a report from 2015 published by Purdue itself. So under the ADA, if there's something called an undue burden of cost, then changes don't have to be made on campus. At the same time, that shouldn't be an acceptable standard that Purdue's held at. And in order to identify where those needs lie, assess those costs, and come up with a long-term action plan, something which can propagate 15 to 20 years from now. That's something, having that kind of long-term planning be beholden to this document would be something that cannot exactly be ignored, considering that immediate reconstruction might not be feasible under certain budgets. It's very hard to say that they won't be making plans for further or future reconstruction if we are giving them a long-term action plan. So one of the therefore clauses of this bill include that one of the main functionalities of this committee is actually going to be in creation of that long-term action plan that we can report to Purdue administration, give them recommendations on how they can move forward with it, how they can split up funding for various projects that they can undertake in order to make campus more accessible, and give equal accessibility to each and every one of the students. So in order to do that, we want to renew the ADA committee for support on accessibility on campus, and we want to invite everyone in here who is excited or passionate or even just slightly interested in increasing accessibility on campus to join the committee. Obviously, the bill isn't creating or isn't designating anyone as the chair of the committee. So Kaylee is going to be organizing the first meeting for this committee, and we will go from there in choosing the committee chair, in creating an action plan for the ADA committee itself in order to make the document, and finally in doing all the research necessary to provide those recommendations to Purdue. But yeah, if anyone has any further questions about it, please let me know.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion at this time? Anyone online? Okay, seeing none, we'll move into a vote on Bill 2034. All those in favor, please raise your name placard. All those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Okay, with the vote of 25-0-0, Bill 2034 passes. Do I hear any other new business at this time? Yes, Senator Griffin-Little.
A motion to bring up Bill 2035.
Okay, it has been properly motioned to bring up Bill 2035. Cabinet Appointment Executive Director of Governmental Relations, Camille Van. So at this time, we'll start with discussion from the authors and then move into a few minutes to let the candidate speak.
Yes, point of order, procedure, whatever it is. Usually we would require a 10-minute recess for legislation submitted after Monday. However, we've come to agreement that we would like to waive this, so I motion to prematurely end the recess.
Okay, it has been properly motioned and seconded to suspend the recess. So we'll now move into a vote on the suspension of the recess. So all those in favor on suspending the recess, please raise your name placards. Okay. In the eyes of the chair, the yeas have it. So we will suspend the recess and continue our discussion on Bill 2035.
So thank you all for being so gracious. I know that this was very last minute. Given the time of year, that it is an election year, when we found out about the resignation, wanted to fill it as quickly as possible because GR has a lot of things in the works. And I was so confident in our candidate because they to in terms of just applications when we them in the summer, didn't know of just duties and obligations, other obligations that she had to fulfill, but performance this year, the director has been extraordinary. She represented Purdue as a whole in government last night on a Hulu-sponsored program. She has led the initiative in terms of tabling and getting students registered to vote. Always makes herself available, even if it's not in terms of GR. And on a more personal note, I have seen Ms. Van in action on a number of occasions, specifically within Manners as their president, and has just raving reviews from other people on campus, former President Banks, former President Boileau, and various others. I could go on, but her resume is impressive. She is impressive, and I am very confident that GR will be in good hands.
Thank you. Camille, would you like to come to the front and say a few words?
Thank you. All right, I wasn't planning on standing in front of everybody today, but I'm very honored and really thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to be the ED for this. As Asada said, this is something I am very, very passionate about. I am very, very big on government and politics. I have a really big passion for educating people and educating voters. So I've done a lot of initiatives to try to get people registered to vote, educating them on absentee ballots, everything like that. Also reached out to a lot of local representatives and stuff so people know who they're voting for on their ballots, if that's local voting. And even if people are voting other ways, you guys can reach out to me and I can help you out. Yes, I did get to do a Hulu-sponsored thing, which is really awesome. I got to reach out and talk to a lot of students from other universities from all around the nation and see about what things they're putting into place to help with voter registration, absentee ballots, because that's really difficult, including because we have students from all over the nation. And you have to send that in, and then we have to remind them to send their absentee ballot. So I'm very honored. Yes, I do have other prior commitments. I am also the president of Manners, which is a Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences, but I'm still able to do everything that I can. I have the most time in the world. And this is just something that I really, really love to do. So I hope you guys are confident in me. I'm here for any questions you guys do have for the upcoming election. I hope you guys are all registered to vote and are going to vote. And yeah.
Okay, you can go ahead and stay in the front in case they have any direct questions for you. So is there any questions for the author or the candidate at this time? Yes, Senator Reed.
Hi, I think it was hinted at, but I just wanted to directly ask, do you have any previous experience serving in PSG in the government relations sector or anything like that? Or?
No, I do not. This is actually my first year in PSG.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Yes, I think someone may have to yield you time. Yes, Senator Bonnet.
I'll yield 2 minutes to the Senior Policy Advisor.
Thank you, Senator Bonnet. How was it like meeting Cal Penn?
Oh my God, yeah, he's actually very cool. I mean, if any of you guys have actually seen Cal Penn speak on anything, he is hilarious. But it was actually really cool to talk to him because the whole process of his show, it's like Cal Penn approves this message, which I advise you guys to all watch. It's very educational. But it's just trying to keep it nonpartisan. And him, he's a very outspoken person, so very interesting to see him not be, one side about things. But it was just really cool. I mean, I also got to meet Francia Reza. She's also, if you've ever seen Grownish, she's a Latina girl. She's really cool too. But yeah, I mean, it was a really cool experience. And they were really open to hearing all of us and hearing all the great things that all the students had to say and the initiatives are doing on campus and making sure people are educated is pretty great. We're a pretty great generation, so I hope you guys know that.
Is there any other discussion from the floor at this time? Yes, Senator, is it Bogard?
Yeah. This is kind of off, but what are your thoughts on the two-party system?
Okay, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. I personally think that the two-party system should not be a thing personally because sorry if I offend anybody here, but overall, we always have a third-party candidate or an independent candidate who literally has a lot of great opinions and everything like that, and they're always shut down from either Democrats or Republicans, even if they have some of the same views. It's just everybody has to be so divided, and we can't be a divided nation. We all have to meet in the middle about things. So yeah, that's my personal opinion. So maybe you know how I lean.
Is there any other discussion at this time? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to take the mic from you and ask you to just step out behind the wall over there, and we'll go ahead and move into a vote. Okay, we'll now move into a vote on Bill 2035 for the cabinet appointment of Camille Van to ED of Governmental Relations. All those in favor, please raise your name placards. All those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Okay, Camille, if you can hear us, you can come on back in. Okay, congratulations with a vote of 25-0-0. We are thrilled to appoint Camille Van to the ED of Governmental Relations. Thank you. Do I hear any other new business at this time? Okay, seeing none, we will move into announcements. Do I hear any announcements at this time? Yes, Pro Temp Griffin Little.
Two things. If the new senators could just stay behind real quick, I just want to make sure that there are no questions about their university or standing committee assignments. And also for committee chairs, be sure to check your Slack because I sent out a doodle poll because I want us all to start meeting soon. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other announcements? Again, I'll remind you that the Senate and Administration dinner is October 27th, 5 to 7 p.m. You'll be hearing more from me about that soon, as well as I'm available after Senate if you have any questions about duties, events, emails, anything like that. And then also the MHA call out is going to be tomorrow night at 6 p.m. So I wanted to plug that. I'm sure Asada and Veronica would love to see you there if you're interested in getting involved. Any other announcements?
What was the location on the dinner?
The dinner is going to be in the Union. It's going to be in the East and West Faculty Lounge. Yep, Chief of Staff.
Okay, so there's a large-scale event occurring towards the end of October. The details are still coming. An aspect and component to it is going to be a dunk tank, and so we need brave souls. So if you can mentally prepare yourself now to put your name in a hat, we will be pulling somebody's name, and you're going to be the lucky volunteer to get dunked. End of October. So you got a month to prepare yourself, but you could be drawn. And if there's a legitimate reason that you would like to not be in that, of which being cold is one of them, then you can let me know. But people's names are going in a hat, and somebody's going to be the lucky winner. So,
Can we nominate people?
yes.
Can we take a vote on people?
All nominations, regardless, are going to be placed in the number of times that you have been submitted as a nomination. So if 10 people nominate you, your name will be in the hat 10 times. So keep that in mind. Be kind to people for the next month. Show up when you're supposed to. Attend office hours. If you don't, you will receive 50 submissions for your name in the hat. Yes.
I nominated
Asada, we need to know who you would nominate now.
What'd you say, Molly? Oh, who do I nominate? Well, you'll have to see. Don't nominate me, please.
Any other announcements? Okay, so seeing none, we'll move into our Senate snaps. And so for our new Senate members, snaps are just our way to acknowledge and give a shout out to people who we think are doing a really good job. So if you have a snap, you can just feel free to unmute yourself or use your microphone to give the snap. And then to follow the guidelines, I'll come around with the snap basket and you can just tell me what you want and I can hand it to you. So does anyone have any snaps? Yes, Senator Reed.
I'd like to give huge snaps to my new fellow Cranert Senator, Marissa. She's already attended committee meetings, has been sending me emails with tons of awesome questions. And even though, it's still in her first few weeks, she's been really involved and active in conversations. So I just want to shout outs to her.
I would like to give snaps to all of my cabinet members. You all make my day every Monday, and I don't think I tell you enough, but I really appreciate all of the work that you've been doing.
I have a snap. So I was working on getting everyone to come and get their name tags. I was shipping out name tags, and there were there was one new senator that came to Croc, and she was like, "Oh, I just joined last week." Her name is Yana, Eanna. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your name, but I was just so impressed that you really came out and was really, your name tag wasn't even on the table, actually. Like, we don't even have one for you yet. And you were there. And I'm just really proud. Like, there are a lot of members who still haven't gotten their name tags yet. And I've been part of PSG for a while. And so we're just so thrilled that you're a part of our organization now. And we can't wait to see what you do. Thank you so much.
I want to give a snap to Pro Temp Griffin Little. Speaking from experience, the job is not the simplest, and she's really been kicking butt and taking names while doing it. Just like really doing a really good job this semester. Thank you.
Okay, any other snaps?
Also want to give a snap to Nathan. We really appreciate you, Nathan, and you're just doing a great job. So if you want to, you're awesome. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, you're very sweet.
Okay, seeing no more snaps, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn. Senator McClary.
Madam President, I move we do now adjourn.
It has been properly motioned and seconded to adjourn this meeting. All of those in favor, please raise your name placards. All those opposed, same sign. Okay, and ayes of the chair, the yeas have it. Thank you all so much.